Courage. You can have courage or comfort, but you can't have both at the same time. And Brene Brown talks about this. And so I believe if you're going into a startup, there is nothing safe about a startup. There's nothing safe about anything, to be honest with you. But with a startup specifically, you really have to have courage. You have to go in every day knowing that things might not work out the way you want them to. And so it's easy to choose comfort. It's easy to choose the option where you feel like you're the safest, but courage is what takes you to the next level.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups in the 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com or add some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Laurie Parfitt. And Laurie started her journey in high school selling various hair stuff or hair things, and then went to college and went into merchandising management. Worked in retail stores or stores in sales. Loved working with people and helping them, and then also happened to intern with Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's. After that, went to work on Capitol Hill with the legislature. Switched jobs, I think, to CNC or CNN Finance or financing organization. And then 9/11 happened, and that had an impact on it. So after that, shifted over to Crafts Foods in their finance department, moved over to Kmart, then to Walmart, then to a couple other businesses, but did that for several years. Then moved over and switched to the cannabis industry and ran some distribution, did that for about a year. Then COVID came along, a friend recruited her to do a cannabis business, after which decided to continue on and do things that she's doing today, and she'll share a little bit more about that. So with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Laurie.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, Devin.
Hey, absolutely excited to have you on. So yeah, so with that, I gave a much more shorter condensed version to a much longer journey, but why don't we rewind a bit and unpack it a bit more. So tell us how your journey got started in high school selling hair products or hair things.
Well, actually, it takes you all the way back to my childhood days, even before high school. So I was always a creative entrepreneur. I wanted to find ways to start businesses, make money. I thought that was all very cool. And I started out at art fairs in my hometown of Glencoe, Illinois. But later on, started to produce my own hair products and sell them up and down the streets of Highland Park and Northbrook and to stores. And it was great because it really taught me a lot about how to present and how to deal with business owners. And so in high school, I actually took a job with Nordstrom. My mom dropped me off at the mall and said, don't come home without a job. And Nordstrom was opening up. And I was lucky that they hired me their first season as a gift wrapper and cashier. And I moved up the chain with them slowly but surely. And I moved into sales very quickly. And one of the great things about Nordstrom is that they have you work on commission. And I believe that every young person should work on commission because you learn to get paid what you're worth. And I realized very quickly the harder I worked and the more I hustled, the better I did. And so I used to go back to college every semester with all of my spending money because I would kill it over the summer. I would kill it over winter break and spring break, to the point where I would work out of their Michigan store sometimes just to have extra income and to help out the store. And so that helped me move into my major of merchandising management. From there, I did intern at Bloomingdale's in New York. And then I worked on Capitol Hill, focusing on banking and finance reform.
So now, let me just ask one question on that, because it makes sense. You know, you go and do internships or work for Bloomingdale and others like that. Now, going to Capitol Hill and legislature, I mean, I guess in some sense, everything you're always selling something, but what made you decide to make that switch? Because it seems like a bit of a difference from going from retail sales to working on Capitol Hill with legislature. So, kind of what prompted that switch of that, or what motivated that?
So one of the things I left out was I actually started my college experience as a political theory and constitutional democracy major, thinking originally I'd go to law school like my father, who was a lobbyist on Capitol Hill for the American Medical Association for about 30 years. And so when Michigan State, which is where I went to college, offered up a program where you could go for a semester and work on Capitol Hill as an intern and take some courses, I realized very quickly I had elective credits that I needed to utilize. And rather than take things like art or other types of classes that I didn't actually think would better my future, I decided to do the internship and utilize my elective credits that way. And it was an amazing experience. I worked for a wonderful congressman. I worked for John Edward Porter, Illinois 10th, Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education. He was also the co-chairman of the Human Rights Caucus and sat on military construction. And he was used to people coming into his office and wanting to work on the environment and human rights. And for me, I loved business. So I got to be part of that side of the office. And I learned a lot while I was there. And it was a fantastic experience. And actually, my father was still lobbying on Capitol Hill, and I got the opportunity to spend a lot more time with him and learn about his world a little bit more. So it was very exciting for me.
Oh, cool. No, sounds like it was a great experience. Now, so how long were you up on doing legislature and working on Capitol Hill for?
I was just there for a semester. I actually got to live in a Boston University housing complex and got to be with a bunch of different schools. So got to know a lot of other people. And I got to be there for 3 to 4 months and take a couple classes as well. So it was really fantastic.
Awesome. Well, sounds like it was a great experience. Now, so you worked on Capitol Hill, did that for a semester, and then I think you switched jobs into finance right about the time that 9/11 happened. Is that right?
Yes, actually. So I graduated from college. And rather than do what I went to school for, which was merchandising management, I decided to try my hand at finance. Someone told me they didn't think it was going to be in the cards for me, and I like a challenge. So I became a financial advisor and trader for Morgan Stanley. And yes, that was right around 9/11. And I was in the trade center on 9/11. That was the second day of our training program. So Morgan Stanley used to offer a 3-week training program. Once you'd passed all your exams, you would go to New York and you'd have a 3-week program where they kind of trained you on the business and everything you needed to be doing. And unfortunately, my first day there was September 10th of 2001, and the next day was 9/11. And that was a sad, scary experience, but one that I think has really helped shape who I am and what I appreciate in life. So I know it was a very sad day for so many, but for me, it really showed me what was truly important in life. And so from that aspect, I do value that. But I worked for Morgan Stanley for about a year and then moved on to CNA Financial, where I worked in investor relations, rating agencies, regulatory FP&A. And so they're an insurance company here in Chicago. They used to be in the big red building. And I had a really warm, supportive team who taught me everything I needed to know about corporate finance. And I took a job there where they hadn't been able to keep anybody for more than 6 months. And I stayed for about 4 years. And I loved it. It was, 24/7 working with the CFO, working with the CEO. And I was only, in my early 20s. To get that kind of exposure was incredibly exciting for me. And so I went from there to Kraft Foods, where I started out also in corporate finance, working on corporate overheads and the Altria spinoff. And then they ended up moving me into sales. And so they were looking for people in sales with financial experience. And so they hired me for the Kmart account. And I got to work on trade marketing, category management, customer development. It was really exciting. And even though it was a declining customer, what declining customers teach you is to be creative. you have to do things a little unorthodox, and I tend to be a little unorthodox. So that works for me.
Mm.
And I went from there over to Beam Suntory, where I worked in distributor strategy. And I managed 165 distributors across the country. And I was there to create, negotiate, and commercialize multi-state distributor contracts. I got to really know the liquor industry, which has actually done so much for my current profession, because regulated liquor is very similar in some ways to the cannabis space.
Mm.
And so from Beam Suntory, I did a brief stint at Walgreens and then moved on to Topco Associates, which is a $14 billion private label cooperative. So that we focused on private label. We were owned by about 52 member retailers and wholesalers across the country. And I was hired in to run one of their business units. So I had full P&L ownership, did all their marketing, um, all of their category strategy, all of their commercialization. And it was a really exciting time for me. I had the general merchandise business unit, and then they later gave me condiments and sauces. And then I started up their brand strategy organization and consumer insights. So it was a lot of fun for me, a lot of, very interesting people. And I got to really know all of the retailers across the grocery space. And then
Oh,
from there,
now let me ask, because
um,
I think the next place you went to was in the canvas industry, but what, maybe
it was
or
actually Miss Con America.
oh, okay. But this question remains the same. Just one quick question. So, because I mean, you kind of, there seems to be, in one sense, a common thread between a lot of the companies you kind of work between. But the other question was, what was the motivation and kind of or switching between the two companies? And that could be everything from, hey, I just don't like getting or don't work well with people to, hey, I'm always looking for the right fit, to the company isn't that, to I always wanted to be, do my own thing and always kind of trying to find an opportunity to scratch that itch, to just, I like to, try and learn different things and, everything in between. So kind of what was that motivation is you're staying kind of somewhat within the same industries or vertical, but yet or switching between the different companies?
Well, part of it was getting opportunities to work in different functional areas. So I've been really fortunate in my career that I've never done the same job twice. So, which is very unusual. My husband always talks about how I got my MBA the old school way. I just did every job. And so every place I went gave me an opportunity to try something new and try something different. And I really loved that. So I love the learning curve. And so getting into a new role and trying to figure it out, those butterflies in your stomach and not knowing if you can really do it is very exciting to me. And so I once heard that if someone offers you an opportunity and you don't think you can do it, take the opportunity and figure out how to do it. And I am one of those people. I can reinvent myself on a dime. I can learn anything. And I believe that every step that I took led me to where I am today. And sometimes you don't know why you made those moves or was that the right move. But at the end of the day, it's all about the journey. And that journey has given me such a great foundation that it allows me to flex the skills I need and utilize them accordingly. And so I feel really lucky to have had those opportunities.
Hmm.
And there was once I got out of the financial services, there really was a common thread through everything. But I got to work on such different projects, different customers, different brands, that it really gave me a holistic perspective of CPG.
No, makes sense, and sounds like it's a good common thread. And it is kind of, I think, even if you were to go get the education, go get the degree with the MBA, there's nothing that replaces going out and getting that experience. And so it's great to be able to work within the different businesses and different industries to be able to garner a lot of that experience that can then set you up as you then kind of venture off into the more of the startup world. So now having that and kind of a lot of that experience in your back pocket, what made, or I think it was, we chatted a bit before, at one point you did kind of switch over to the cannabis industries and running distribution, which does seem like a bit of a difference in responsibilities or path or part of the journey. So what prompted that switch and how did that come about?
That's a great question. So I had been at Ms. Con America, Regula and Bertoli, for about 5 years. And they were a great company, but I was getting to the point where I needed something new, something different. And they were sort of smaller. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to grow there. And my mentor, who was my boss over at Topco Associates, became the president of a cannabis company. And so he calls me up one day and he's like, I need a reference for this job. And so I was happy to give him a reference. I really credit him with making me who I am as a marketing professional. He really spent a lot of time teaching me about how to be creative and strategic. And so I was happy to give him the reference. And about a month later, he called me up and he's like, so how about we talk about you coming over to head up all of marketing? And I was like, okay, marketing is my passion. So I love the creative side. And luckily I have that analytical background. So the combination of the two really works for me. And I'm like, and the opportunity to be in a nascent industry. So I come from spirits. I spent time at Beam Suntory. And, one of the things we always thought about at Beam was, what was it like coming out of prohibition? How did that happen? How did this industry really emerge? And what was that like for the people who brought it out? And this was my opportunity to experience that. And so this is the same kind of thing. And I love highly regulated industry. I absolutely love that about spirits. It's complicated, it's interesting. There's always things changing that you need to know. And so the opportunity to come work in a nascent industry like the cannabis space and to work with a multi-state operator, and not a huge multi-state operator, but a significant one, and really work on the marketing and the retail side was incredibly exciting to me. And I am so thankful for the experience I had with Forefront and Mission Dispensaries because it really gave me the foundation that I needed to do what I do today.
Mm. No, makes perfect sense. Sounds like it was a fun opportunity and a great shift. And so you to maybe rewind slightly, but just to fill that in, I think you mentioned that you worked in with doing the distributors for about a year before your friend recruited you over the cannabis industry. And then since then you've been, building out the company, bringing on team members and going out. So tell us a little, kind of catch us up a little bit since you made that shift over to the cannabis industry, doing the startup with your friend and working on building that brand. How's it gone? Where's it at today? And give us a little bit of the status update.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Forefront, my experience there was amazing, but my timing was not ideal. And so in early 2020, we ended up in the capital markets crisis, and it was COVID. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. All marketers across the industry were kind of let go as a result of not having funding available, which was such a sad experience for me. But as I had to try to figure out what I was going to do, actually, a friend of my husband's recruited for the gig economy. And he's like, well, why don't you just try consulting? I have a project and you can do it until you find something else and see what you think of it. And so I tried it and it was in the CPG space. But what I loved about it was I got a seat at the table. And so even though I wasn't a member of the leadership team, I was treated as a member of the leadership team. And my opinion really meant something in a very traditional company. And so I realized that consulting wasn't just about a stopgap. It wasn't just for people who wanted to go and get permanent positions, or being, a McKinsey or a BCG or a Bain. There was a whole different world to consulting. And so I decided that it wasn't going to be my stopgap anymore. And I decided to form my own company called LKP Impact Consulting. And I am a fractional chief marketing officer in the cannabis space. So I work with brands, operators, technology, and ancillary services that don't need or can't afford a full-time CMO. I provide all of those services for less than the cost of one person. And we can size and scale to meet the needs of small startups up to multi-state operators. And it's been a very interesting journey for me. It definitely is a roller coaster. I have my up days, my down days, but overall, it's been incredibly exciting. And as part of that, I ended up getting to build my own brand, which I hadn't really anticipated doing. So in order to get started, I started speaking everywhere. I got really lucky that Cannabis Business Times, who does Cannabis Conference, invited me to be a speaker during COVID and has continued to have me be a speaker year after year. They put me on their advisory board for the conference, and they were instrumental in kind of getting me on the map. And I started doing podcasts and I started doing speaking engagements here in Chicago. I do one for a major networking group here called Tony P's Cannabis Events. And then I was doing one for Illinois Women in Cannabis. And I speak at conferences all over the country. And all of a sudden, my brand started to build. And I have been really fortunate to be able to utilize that to build a great company with an amazing team. And we're poised to grow in 2023. And I have to say, it's the scariest thing I have ever done. And I had no idea whether I could do this. And there are days where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But it is the most exciting, wonderful experience I have had. And the companies I've gotten to work with and the people I've gotten to meet, I feel like I really have found my home and my family in this industry.
Well, sounds like it was, you found a great place to settle into and be able to leverage a lot of your past experience and be able to really grow something. So it sounds like it's been a great opportunity. So now with that, give us an idea, and you kind of started to touch on it, but where do you see the next 6 to 12 months going for you, or where do you see things headed?
Well, as an industry, the industry is struggling right now. So just like every industry out there, the economic landscape is not ideal. And in the cannabis space, it's worse. So when we think about, and I don't want to use the terminology that we keep hearing, but when we see economic slowdown and we see capital tightening and interest rates rising and inflation going up, that hurts all kinds of industries. So whether it be CPG or pharma or any technology, we see those industries get hurt. But in the cannabis space, it becomes much more amplified because our investor community is much smaller. And so the traditional investors that you see in other industries are not necessarily in the cannabis space. We're a much smaller circle. So when capital tightens up, it tightens up among a much smaller group. And so it's access to funding becomes that much more difficult. And that's where we currently are in the cannabis space, is we are seeing a tightening of capital in the industry. There is still funding available, but it's going to be doled out in a much more selective manner. And I think we're going to start seeing, who can survive within the industry and who cannot. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But for me, what I truly focus on is helping these companies be better. I put their marketing together, scale appropriately, and we do that at the size and scale that meets their needs. So we understand the limited funding, we understand how things work, and we make sure that we adjust for what they can actually do. So we're all about meeting companies where they're at. We're not a huge agency. We're not overly expensive. And we've really tried to capture our niche market. We work with the CPG side as well, which has less limitations. But on the cannabis side, we understand what companies are going through, and we want to make sure that we can support them during these times so that they can be successful later on. So for 2023, I do see that it's going to be a challenging time in the industry, but I am bullish on our opportunities because we are there to be truly supportive and a loving, supportive part of the industry so that we can help these companies grow and survive. So that is our overall objective. And so we're really focusing on Together We Rise this year because we believe that if we all come together as an industry and hold hands and do the right things, we're all going to win in the long term.
No, and I think that definitely makes sense, and it's interesting to kind of sit back, I guess, a little bit from the sidelines, and whether it's this industry, I look at a little bit, much different, but Bitcoin and some of the digital currency, and there's a lot of industries that are still trying to find their footing, that are make big leaps forward and then take steps back, and kind of how that all continues to evolve. And it's always interesting to see how it continues to evolve and who are going to be the leaders and what direction we'll go. So definitely sounds like it'll be a fun a future journey that are yet ahead. So well, with that, now as we're kind of reaching towards the present day of your journey, and even looking at a bit into the future, always a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
So along my journey, and I'll take it from my consulting journey, because that's the most recent. The worst decision I ever made was I hopped out of consulting very briefly and took a full-time role. I always thought I'd do consulting until I found the right opportunity, and I had a client that wanted me to come on full-time, and I did try it out, but very quickly realized that wasn't for me. And I would say that it was definitely a misstep, but at the same time, I feel like I learned something from it, and I learned what really is important to me now. And having looked back at my past, I always thought I always chased W-2 income. I was brought up to believe that that was the safe option. And so when it was presented again, I thought, why not? This has been going well, and I should try it. But what I didn't realize was how much I had changed. And what was good for me was to learn that lesson quickly. And I always believe in you fail fast and you learn. And so that was definitely, the one misstep that, I feel was, not optimal. But at least from there, I have learned who I am and what I want and how I can make things work going forward.
Hmm. Well, sounds like a good thing to learn from, and it was a good opportunity to prepare for the future. So it definitely makes perfect sense. Second question is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Have courage. You can have courage or comfort, but you can't have both at the same time. And Brene Brown talks about this. And so I believe if you're going into a startup, there is nothing safe about a startup. There's nothing safe about anything, to be honest with you. But with a startup specifically, you really have to have courage. You have to go in every day knowing that things might not work out the way you want them to. And so it's easy to choose comfort. It's easy to choose the option where you feel like you're the safest. But courage is what takes you to the next level. And being scared and having imposter syndrome, we talk about imposter syndrome, especially with women, but I believe everybody has it. I've talked to tons of men across multiple industries, and they feel it. And sometimes I think, imposter syndrome is a bad thing, but I also think it's a good thing because sometimes it drives you to be that much better. And when you have imposter syndrome, you feel scared. And sometimes that fear drives great results. And so I would say have courage, try something new, be ready to fail, because when you have courage, you're likely at some point to fall on your butt and have an experience you don't want to have. But it's all about how you pick yourself back up.
No, and I think that that courage, and even that imposter syndrome, I mean, I think it's, well, hey, you're representing something you're not, and I think to that degree you shouldn't be dishonest, but it can push you to, hey, I'm going to work towards being that ideal of what I or want to be or should be, and I'm going to continue almost that fake it till you make it, or in other words, I'm going to work towards being that, and then as I'm getting in that position, I'm going to continue to represent that I'm making steps. I think that's a great takeaway, and everybody needs courage, especially when you're diving into the world of startups or small business. So great piece of advice. So Well, now as we wrap up this episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Absolutely. So Laurie at lkpimpact.com is my email. You can find me on LinkedIn, and please reach out to me that way. But reach out at any time. And I love meeting new people and talking and learning about their worlds and what they're doing. So whether you want to work with me or you just want to have a great conversation, I am open to both.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make some great connections. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Laurie, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure they click share, subscribe, and leave us a review, because it really helps us to share all these journeys with even more startups and small businesses to help them along their way or help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents, trademarks, or anything else to your startup or your small business, just reach out to us but by going to strategymeeting.com and grabbing some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again, Laurie, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much.